All right, welcome everyone. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to what I hope will be many conversations like this. But my very first Substack Live, and Mike's too. I am Nathan Lang-Raad, and I'm here with Mike Taubman. And if you've been following either of our Substacks or LinkedIn feeds lately, you've probably seen us both writing about AI in education. And really, been a lot of noise out there right now. And Mike and I thought it'd be a great idea to come on the Substack and chat about what we're seeing about AI and AI's intersection within education. And so, Mike, it seems like everyone has a framework. Everyone's got a definition of AI literacy. Every week there's some update on one of the large language models, coming up with a new feature. And, really tonight, our conversation, what I want to chat with you about is really drilling down to three areas that we call AI fluency. And it's going to be when to use AI, when to question AI, and when to turn it off. Because real AI fluency isn't about knowing all of these prompting techniques or all the latest model features. It's really about developing good sound judgment. So, Mike, before we dive into these three areas tonight for our conversation, I thought we could both introduce ourselves and give everyone a sense of where we're coming from and also about, why we're thinking about this so much. So, Mike, good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, great to
How
be
are
here.
you?
I'm good.
you
I'm good.
you had a full day of teaching today, so I mean,
Yes, I did, and we
yeah,
and the kids and I, my own kids and I, got home, and dinner was made, so we're in good shape.
okay.
No, it's great to be here, and thank you everybody who's with us to think about this issue together. So briefly about me, the kind of where I'm coming from here. I started teaching in Newark, New Jersey in 2005, and I've been there ever since. I taught middle school English for a while, and then shifted to high school English. And then about 6 years ago, I pivoted to create a program about career connected learning and kind of purpose development. It's called the Summit Program. The students named it that because it's like the end of high school, 11th and 12th graders, summit of the mountain. They like the metaphor. So those are two of the kind of perspectives I'm bringing here. Is I taught English for a long time. I was an English major. There's kind of a humanities perspective there. And then every day I show up to school and I work with about 100 11th and 12th graders to figure out their futures and help them try to figure out what dreams they want to make come true. So those are kind of two ways I'm thinking about AI and how it can inform education. And the third, I should mention briefly, is I had an exciting opportunity to be a fellow with Stanford Digital Education, where I got to work with that team last year to develop an AI literacy curriculum that we piloted in my classroom and some other schools. And so I've kind of thought specifically about AI literacy and then tried it in a few different contexts. And I'm excited to talk about all that today.
Definitely. I can't wait. I mean, every time you post, there's always some brilliant new kind of tidbit I learned from you. And I love the fact that you are engaging with AI, not just on Substack, but you are bringing your students along in this journey. So I'm excited to learn about all of your learnings. And I know you just started school and you're trying out some new kind of AI strategies with your students. So it'll be great to get some real practical insights today. Well, for those who don't know me, I am Nathan Lang-Raad. I am a speaker, an author, and a consultant. I've been a teacher, I've been a principal, a director of curriculum and instruction, and a lot of my work with districts and ed techs now have been in this intersection. Before it was intersection of technology and education, which obviously it still is, but now it is this very complex, very evolved AI in education. And so, again, if you followed Mike's Substacks and my Substacks as well, you can tell it is the bulk of what we both are writing about and are talking about, as well, I think, as it should be. I think this should be top of mind for not only every professional, but every educator, because there's already, there's surveys saying that 65, 70% of educators are using AI in some way. And like I opened up, today our conversation is really not going to be about prompting strategies that we keep seeing or our favorite LLMs, which obviously if it comes out naturally, that's fine. But it really is about this AI fluency that we keep hearing about on our social feeds. And this first area of AI fluency I want to talk about is this kind of when to use AI. And I'm really interested, Mike, in your dealings with AI and how you have brought this into the classroom. Talk to me about how your students have responded to AI. How have you used it directly with students, and when have you seen it enhance students' learning?
Yeah, and then I'm excited to get to your takes on all this too in a moment.
Yeah.
So actually, earlier today, a few hours ago, we launched a project in that career exploration purpose development class I was talking about, where they're doing this 10-day project where they're trying to figure out how to bring their purpose to life in a career field that interests them, trying to bring these things
Yeah.
together. And as any teachers on the call know, uh, personalization at that level where it's like my personal purpose in life and what my gifts are and what problems I want to fix in the world with my career interests, mapping that all into a concrete project is a lot for any teacher, including
Yeah.
me. And the thing that AI enables, which we just did earlier today, was kind of instant personalization in a way that's really powerful. Frankly, it's something that just wasn't possible a few years ago. So I created a bot that we used in class today. It was like a custom made LLM bot that
Wow.
we put in the classroom on their screens. And then they put in the first question was like, what's your general sense of purpose? And we've been looking at this last week in an analog way in a notebook, pencils and pens, reflecting on purpose. They took the notebook idea, put it in the LLM. That was the first thing. Second thing it asked was, what career fields are you considering? Third, what career roles inside those fields? And then it was off to the races. Then it's giving them three different project options. They're going back and forth with it. Like maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. It's mapping the project onto the dates I gave it. So I told it what
Wow.
days we'd be working on it. Nothing like a due date for students, right? So they see the due date pop up. And then I'd also fed it a bunch of frameworks I wanted to use around PBL, deeper learning, this idea Jal Mehta has at Harvard. And
Yeah.
so you put that all together, and it happened so fast that we had more time in class than I was expecting at the end. I had
Right.
one of those moments as a teacher where I was like, oh, we have more time to discuss because within 20 minutes, you can get a classroom of 32 students to a place where they kind of have a sense of what a project looks like that's super personalized and specific and feasible.
Wow. Now, Mike, I would assume that most students in your class, you have high school students, that they have used probably ChatGPT before. How has their experience translated from this kind of AI personal use? I assume they're using it personally. Like, I'm curious what they say in class when they use this AI chatbot. Does it have the feel of using ChatGPT for them, or do they feel like they are like brand new AI technology tool?
I think, like all things with teaching, it's important to often start at a baseline and just presume you're going to make sure everybody's on the same page to start before you go
Yeah.
off into personalization. So I actually taught it like I would teach anything with like a sense of let me just introduce it. I put it on the
Okay.
screen. I typed in my answers. I showed them what to say, like what kind of thing to say next. And so it was very much a sort of I, we, you sequence
Yeah.
with the AI. To your point, I'm sure they have familiarity with AI in different settings, but I think it's smart as educators if we start from a baseline of like anything, let's do
Yeah.
some modeling, let's break this down quickly, and then see where students go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like how you have framed this in your classroom where students are being very intentional about their use of AI. You have very specific goals in mind where you're not just going into AI time and then going back out of it. There's a very set intention for why we're using the AI.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've written, I think, a lot about this idea of how AI can support kind of cognitive load.
Yeah.
And to
Yeah.
me, I feel like I was watching that happen in class today. Do you mind sharing more about that?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. So, really, and those of you who are new to hearing about cognitive load theory, it was developed by a researcher named John Sweller. And he talks about three types of cognitive load. Now, if you look at all the brain research, the neuroscientists tell us that we are only about able to handle 4 to 7 pieces of information all at once. So, when, as educators, when we are teaching students, we keep this in mind about working memory and being able to process multiple things at once. So we call this cognitive load. And Sweller categorizes cognitive load into three different areas. So we have intrinsic cognitive load, we have our extraneous cognitive load, and we have germane cognitive load. And I won't go into all the research, but just kind of just briefly, the intrinsic load, that is the mental energy required to learn anything brand new. So if you're learning a new math procedure, if you're learning about some historical event, it is the energy required to kind of learn that brand new piece of information. That's intrinsic load. Our extraneous load, that's the one that I'm really interested in with AI, because extraneous load, that is the media through which, as learners, we interact with information. So, for example, if we are reading about a historical event through a textbook, or we're reading it online, or we're listening to a podcast or watching videos, the brain power, the processing that it takes, that is the extraneous load. And typically that has to do with efficiency. So that's why, as teachers, Mike, whenever we are thinking about designing lessons and developing activities for our students, we want to decrease the extraneous load involved. We want to make sure that students have the information without having to work for, like if we're giving them an activity, they're not confused on what the directions are. So we eliminate that extraneous load by providing very clear learning targets, very clear directions. And then the last part of that cognitive load theory is germane load. That is the type of cognitive load that really helps with transfer learning. So it's whenever we learn something new, but then we apply it to a new circumstance. We start to be able to analyze it against other new things that we encounter in life, and that is that germane load. So we like that. That's the productive struggle that we like. We like the germane part of that load, and we also like the intrinsic. But the extraneous is what taps into our kind of working memory, and that's where I think. And I wrote about how AI can really help with reducing this kind of extraneous load. So if we're a teacher and let's say we're learning about a time period or a war, and we are asking our students to kind of dive into this, and we're giving them books and podcasts, and we're giving them lots of terms and lots of dates, that's going to really tax their cognitive load. That's the extraneous load. And so I'm really interested in how do we use AI to help decrease this extraneous load. So, can we use AI to provide definitions? Can we use AI to help with providing some context or with activating prior knowledge? Now, again, some of this has to be a part of our intrinsic and germane cognition, but making it easier for access. We talk about, universal design for learning and access for all students. And that's what I'm focused on with our cognitive load and our cognitive debt, is making sure that we remove as many barriers as possible and using AI to help us remove those barriers. So, and that it sounds, very similar to kind of how that chatbot, I think, in your classroom, Mike,
Yeah.
how you're helping students with the kind of struggle that we want them to have, while the chatbot questions them, asks them for evidence, and so forth.
Yeah, no, it's interesting when you mentioned that this it's extraneous, right? Is the
Yeah.
middle part there. I, to me today, and when I was launching this project, the goal was not yet how to manage a project or how to
Yeah.
design a project. That'll come later. That we're
Yeah.
September. We're ramping up here. I want them to jump into the work of a field and the work of their purpose, because the
Yeah.
faster they do that, in my experience, the more they buy into this notion of growth and the broader destination they're trying to head to. What
Yeah.
AI just did today was, in some ways for me, but certainly for them, was it took off the cognitive load of mapping out this project. It
Yeah.
said, here's a map. In fact, here are the dates that your teacher will be giving you to work on this. And so that then allows them to focus entirely right now on what they want to make, what they want to produce, which professional they want to talk to, how to reach out to them, the things I want them worried
Yeah.
about right now. And I think to your points, obviously not just for my class, like if I was teaching English, the same thing would be true, or any
Yeah.
subject. This is a way to help us focus students' attention where we want it focused, but in ways
Yeah.
that are more complex and rigorous, because
Yeah.
this technology facilitates a kind of a superstructure intellectually that is hard to pull off as a single teacher in a classroom sometimes.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It reminds me of the saying around, cognitive training wheels versus, cognitive crutches. And essentially, that's what you are building to, where, education sometimes, Mike, I think we are so hyper focused on efficiency, but again, and maybe it's more efficiency within the planning piece of, a teacher. I want to be able to create a lesson plan on the fly, or be able to make sure my standards are aligned, or provide an assessment that gives me really good data. But for really good, high quality instruction and learning, we have to take out the efficiency. There's another phrase called like desirable difficulties. And if AI is eliminating the struggle that builds expertise, then I think we're using it wrong. I don't think we're
Yeah.
building those mental muscles for true, deep, authentic learning.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so
Yeah,
to make your point, if for the entire year I had AI tools working with kids to launch projects and scaffold the project, they would not learn that skill. But
yeah,
right now, that is not the most desirable struggle for me, or most productive struggle, as we sometimes say at my school. And
yeah,
so I think it's all about educators using AI at the right way at the right time to do the right thing, as opposed
yeah.
to this kind of blanket, like, now I will have an AI powered classroom, or I will never use
Right.
AI. Like there's a middle path there that's much more nuanced where I think this technology really shines.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I don't think of those 70% of teachers who are using AI. I think we'd be hard pressed to find any of those 70% saying, you know what, no, AI nowhere belongs in any part of learning. I think a lot are concerned, um, and we all should be, about making sure that AI is not taking away the social component of learning. And maybe this kind of segues us into this middle section of our conversation today. We talk about, when to use AI, but when do we question AI? Because there's a lot of concerns about AI and hallucinations and not being factual. And it's, obviously how large language models are built. It's intrinsic to how they're built. And so I'm curious about, when you're teaching your students about AI, and, you know, talking to them about not trusting AI, what does that conversation sound like? Because I know we are both friends, well, connected to Ethan Molik, and maybe we'll have him on a Substack one day to chat about this. But he talks a lot about the jagged frontier of AI, and so I'm curious about what that conversation sounds like, with your students, with trusting AI and understanding, how AI actually works.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's such an important concept, the jagged frontier one. I think there's kind of two ways to think about this. One
Yeah,
is I think there's an important preamble preamble that gets repeated a lot during the year about this exact issue, regardless of how we're using AI. I think it's, young
yeah,
people need to hear things a lot. We all do before they sink in sometimes. And so I think it's really important to say to students what I said, what my version of it today was: AI kind of knows everything. It's been trained on like
yeah,
the corpus of human knowledge production over the millennia.
yeah,
At the same time, it's not particularly wise, and it's not
yeah,
always right or even accurate. And so I think to say that to them, that sort of paradox of like, it kind of knows everything, but it doesn't always say accurate things, and it's certainly not wise.
yeah,
Just saying that to them over and over again, I think, is important. But then on a
yeah,
more sort of specific level, I think it's really important to have this cycle of use it and question it and think about it, talk about it. So to give an example, today in class, one of the students was launching a fashion project. She wants to like kind of build a fashion brand, design some clothes, and then figure out how marketing works and sort of the work of the fashion field. So the first step was she started drawing in her notebook a fashion design during class today. And I came over and we looked at it and we were talking about what her inspiration was. And then we took a picture of it and we uploaded the picture of her drawing to the AI we're using. And we said, okay, she's working on this project. What do you think about this design? And the AI had some thoughts, and then she was like, "That's not." No, she disagreed. She was like, "No,
wow,
that's not what I'm going for. That's not the look here. That's not my vision."
yeah,
And I was like, "Exactly, exactly." And in fact, I stopped class to kind of make this point to everybody. No matter what field you're taking on, what project you're working on, this is about you and your vision. And
yeah,
AI will be super helpful with some things, but other times will either be wrong, will hallucinate, et cetera, or it just won't be aligned to you. And I think that's such an important thing for young people to understand, is that this is not an oracle speaking to them, and it certainly isn't a externalization of who they are.
Yeah.
They are themselves. They have these unique gifts and these incredible attributes and these bright futures. And AI can be on the side supporting them, but it's very important to stay there, and they see it from that distance. And so that was just a great moment in class where the jagged frontier was just visible, where like, okay, AI helped you plan this project. It's probably gonna be very good at marketing. It probably knows more about fashion marketing than me or the student who's just in high school, but it's never gonna know her vision for fashion. And if
Yeah.
she ever lets it kind of enter that space, she's losing touch with what makes her so special. And she's also misunderstanding what AI is for.
Well, assuming that's example, Mike, of true AI literacy, AI fluency in the classroom, a student being able to question the authoritative voice of AI. I think it's so important. And I think, I mean, if I were designing a kind of unit on, I was started school and teaching students about AI. That's one of the first things that I would do with my students is talking about, for one, how large language models are constructed, how the data sets are trained, and then also looking at, why it sounds so confident, why it sounds authoritative, is how human beings, how we grab. I mean, we all have seen politicians do this, where or anybody that that is a good speaker, they speak with confidence and fluently, and so we tend to lean into that. So it's fantastic that you're already kind of teaching your students to be skeptical, that healthy skepticism.
Yeah, and I want to hear, because I know you've written about this, so I want to hear your thoughts on
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
One thing you just made me think of is that I think teenagers love questioning authority. It's one of their jobs in life, to
yeah,
question authority. And here's another authority they need to learn to question: AI.
yeah,
And I think if we position it that way, I think it kind of clicks into some natural teenage and student instincts that are really healthy in this moment, which is like, just because you can't see anybody talking when AI is talking to you, just because it's coming out in this way that sounds like the truth, doesn't mean you turn off that healthy skepticism and that sort of innate awareness as a young person that the people around you have motivations,
yeah,
and AI has motivations that it's been trained to have as a sort of system. And so, anyways,
yeah.
tell us more about your writing about this, because I know it's
Yeah,
related.
no, you're exactly right. I mean, I think it is so important. I know we, with professional development, we shouldn't, dedicate too much time with the technical pieces of AI and LLMs, but I do think it is important that we talk about, how they are constructed, because it does help with building really healthy skepticism. And I've seen about this SCAI written, this kind of like semi-conscious feeling. It feels very human. And again, like large language models were built to generate very fluent, well-structured language, and so they're supposed to be polished, they're supposed to sound confident. But what's interesting is that an AI doesn't know if what they're saying is true. So just because it's written in an authoritative style doesn't mean that it's true. So there's this probably whole like philosophical conversation to have with educators and with students about truth. What makes something a fact? How do you know an output when given to you if that is true or not? And so being able to help students with giving them tools on, here's what you can do when you get an AI output, to evaluate if it's correct or not, because there's this kind of mismatch between the confidence of the delivery of the AI and the uncertainty of the facts. And we know that AI can be sycophantic, and it can be flaky. We'll press it and then we'll provide our perspective. Oh yeah, no, you're right. And it's a complete 180. And then you like, question it, and it will say, oh yeah, well actually I was, I need to clarify. And it's you can keep prompting and prompting. And so that's a really, I like it when students are trying to not maybe trick the AI, but trying to really push back and being able to develop those kind of healthy muscles, and teach students to ask, where does information come from? What evidence supports it? And, can I verify it from a trusted source? And I'm in the habit of asking for sources. And of course, we have to check the sources, because we know that's a part of the hallucination too, is it makes up studies and gives you links that are not real. So you have to verify those links and so forth. So there's still a lot of work to be done with questioning AI.
Yeah, no, totally. And what you're making me think of there is that there's a lot that needs to be taught technically, like you're saying, about how these
Yeah,
systems work, how they're designed, everything you're talking about. But I think also what can be really powerful for young people is a feeling about it, in addition to
yeah,
knowing about it. And so what I mean is, today in class at one point, I was joking with them as I said something to the AI on the screen because I'm modeling it, right. I'm like typing the next thing, and it was like, great idea, and I was like, look at that. I had a great idea. This AI thinks I'm a clever person. And if you say it like that, again, you're turning on this innate ability they have as young people to be skeptical of, like, well,
yeah,
wait a second, like it's clearly just saying that. And if you interject those moments in little ways,
yeah,
even like walking around the room afterwards, I was saying to kids sometimes, like, oh, you do have a great idea, but it definitely was going to say you had a great idea, right? Like those, you kind of making that point to them that this is almost funny how sycophantic it is. And then when they
yeah.
understand the underlying structure, they can combine sort of theory and experience together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the great practices that we should instill in our students is that whenever you encounter an output from AI, being able to have the students explain it back, maybe call it like the explain it back test. So if you can't explain how the AI arrived at a certain answer, then you should probably think twice about just putting that output on, copying and pasting. But being able to go through the cognitive, back to that kind of cognitive load conversation earlier, but being able to explain something back is being able to question the AI, understanding what is it true? What are the sources? How can I justify? And so forth. I think that's really important. So I think that's a good part of this kind of explain it back procedure we can do with our students.
Yeah, sometimes, on that note, I'll sometimes have them last year, and I'm going to do it again this year. Just they'll be talking to it about whatever the project or any class what they're learning, and then you can just in the middle of the conversation say, "How do you know that? Where are you getting this information? How do you know you're right?" And two things happen when you do that. When you have a student type into an AI in the middle of another conversation, "Where are you getting this information? How do you know you're right?" etc. First of all, you're doing that sort of annotation you're talking about, where you're finding out
Yeah,
more about where the AI is getting the information, which can be helpful in lots of research ways. But then secondarily, you're again creating this mindset of, at all times when I'm using this, a small part of my mind should be thinking, where is this coming from? Like, how does it know it's right? And I think
yeah,
it's almost like it's like breaking a certain kind of spell, and
yeah,
realize and waking up and being like, okay, this is a piece of technology designed by humans. I'm interacting with it. I don't think that my laptop, like sitting there on my desk, knows everything.
yeah,
And neither do these systems inherently just suddenly become oracles. And I think, but they're designed in a way where they can feel that way, especially for kids. So to your point, the annotations, the sort of questioning, even questioning the AI itself, can help them remember that and kind of stay awake in that way.
yeah, yeah. You know, as we think about AI literacy, AI fluency, so we've gone from using when to use AI, when to question AI, which I think we should always be questioning AI as a part of the learning process. But then moving to this kind of last part of the conversation of when to turn AI off. And I know in the classroom, whenever we're doing maybe writing assignments or assessments, it's really important to say, okay, removing scaffolds and supports. It is all about you. So I'm curious in your thinking, your learning journey. So I'm curious how your students respond to that, Mike, when you tell them, okay, we're going to turn off AI and just do this now, just do analog now.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll give you an example. Today in the same class, so we started class with sort of AI supporting the launch of these projects they were doing and helping them sort of take off the cognitive load, to your point of how to map out a project. And we'll get to that later this year. But for now, I just want them working on the actual creation they're doing. So AI enables that at the start of class. It's a helpful tool. Then we pivot to this young woman who is drawing her fashion and realizes the AI does not have a very good fashion sense and is not going to be helpful at all as she designs her fashion, maybe for the marketing, maybe for subtle touches, but not the overall vision. At the end of class, that's such an important moment. And I think this is true in any content area, to that same lesson, if possible, close the laptops, turn off the screens, turn off the AI, make a big show of turning it off on your screen if it's projected, and now I'm going to power you down, some kind of line like that. And then saying to them some version of what I said today in class, which was, let's pause here and reflect on that experience. What was it like
Yeah.
to engage with the AI today? Where did it help you? Where did
Yeah.
you realize it wasn't helpful? Have them write in old fashioned, write in a notebook, turn and talk, share out with the class. And then to me, the message I hope our students get this year across grade spans in colleges and universities, wherever they are, is that this is a powerful tool and it's here to be used in that way to support you and your flourishing, academic flourishing, personal flourishing. We can't mistake this tool for the thing that will do the flourishing. This is about
Yeah.
you. They're the center of attention. This is their lives, and here's a new tool that's come in that can support them and teachers can use to help support them. But I think we have to end literally almost every class we use AI with a brief reflection, conversation, and then just making sure someone says, whether it's a teacher or a student, we are more important than ever in the AI era. Your humanity,
Yeah.
your gifts, your intelligence, your future, that's what matters. This
Yeah.
thing can enable us to do more of that, to help you achieve all that, but you're the point. You're the
Yeah.
main character of this story, and AI is not taking on that role, and we need to always remember that.
Yeah. Ah, that's so powerful. And as you were sharing your story, I was thinking about the sequence of how we're using AI with intention now. And I think many times, and I wonder if you've seen this too, Mike, is um, we are getting into the habit, we collectively as professionals, but also as students and learners, of going to AI first instead of
Yeah.
understanding from, like, what is the perspective that I have right now? Like, what is Mike's perspective? What is Nathan's perspective now? Question my own thinking, question my own experience. And then once I kind of outline this my own kind of like schema, then I can consult AI in a very targeted, specific way. So I think it's so important to not start with AI and have those kind of AI off moments, because we are, and I write about this in my blog about metacognitive laziness. And there are studies where students, yes, if they use AI and then complete a task, an assessment, in the moment, they may score high on a performance level. But if they were to be studied a few months later and they were tested,
Yeah.
not using AI and just using self-evaluation and strategic thinking, then they were shown to not have that higher efficacy. So, I mean, studies are obviously showing it. I mean, just our work around reasoning and going all the way back to Bloom's taxonomy, we understand that how learning is constructed, and being very careful about um, turning AI off and using those strategies that we know work, like Socratic seminars.
Yeah.
Having learning is so very social, and if we get into this AI trap of constantly, I wrote about this the other day about us kind of living in this AI output space where
Yeah.
we're using so much creative energy just on pushing back on AI constantly. Can you refine this? Can you and so you're using up all your tokens, arguing with the AI, as opposed to using up your creative energy on obviously learning at the highest levels. And I think it's so important that we really reevaluate how we're spending, moving back into from editing back into our creation phase, and you pulling in AI whenever we need, maybe to summarize or make some edits or get some revisions. But that creative space, we can't offload that to AI. We shouldn't offload it to AI.
Yeah, no, you had a great point about this the other day on Substack, where you said we're going to get trapped. This isn't your exact words, but kind of
Yeah.
trapped or caught in the design space that AI affords,
Yeah.
not in the design space our unique intelligences afford. And I think that's such an important point. And I think for young people, there's this kind of, you can come at this from a few different angles, and for different students, different things will resonate. Showing them how like transformer architecture works, and how words get tokenized. And then I'm an English major, so I'll do my best here. But words get tokenized, and then all these different mathematical formulas are produced, and then the token comes out as another word on the other side that, depending on the temperature of the model, is the most probable word or
Yeah.
token next in the sequence.
Yeah.
If you say that to some students, they will start to understand, especially more the STEM style students, so wait a second, the horizon of thought here is limited by probability.
Yeah.
There's certain tokens it won't ever say in that
Yeah.
sentence most of the
Yeah.
time. So that's a STEM student could get that. Or you could say to more of a humanities student, this has been trained on everything that humans have ever written or produced. That's what it knows.
Yeah.
What are the potential implications of that in terms of what new things it could think of? And if you have the right discussion, students will start to arrive at the realization that it only knows what has been done.
Yeah.
And of course, they can make predictions, and I'm sure it's going to do lots of amazing things to create novel scientific, advances, et
Yes.
cetera. I believe in this technology in certain ways,
Correct.
but I think it's really important for students to understand it's limited by its own horizons.
Yeah.
In some ways, the amount it knows is limiting to it. And young people are still learning, and that's partly where their creativity and growth and possibility come from.
Yeah.
And then the last kind of angle, so that's one angle is like the STEM angle, one's the humanities angle. And then for everybody, I think all students, there's this important realization that at some point in the near future, after school, when you're applying for jobs or whatever, there will be a moment where you'll be in a room with other people and you will either know what you're talking about or you won't.
Yeah.
Without AI. And I know eventually we'll have, earbuds and glasses and all that, but the point remains that people will be able to tell if you're for real or not.
Yeah.
And we want you, young people, to be for real because you are.
Yeah.
You're amazing, and you have to embrace that and hone that so that you are the most impressive person in every room you walk into without AI. And then you also know how to use AI. That's like this. Then we're talking about something really powerful. But I think, to your point, we have to make sure students have a lot of chances to think about this exact question you're raising, which is what are the sort of horizons that AI limits us to?
Yeah, brilliant, Mike. Back in the days of the four C's in the 21st century skill, we come the four C's, and we added a couple more C's, like the six C's, and that's collaboration and critical thinking and creativity and communication. Those. I know that it's the cliche statement. Never have the C's been so important. Definitely now with the advent of AI and its integration in education, those C's are really important. And I was listening to Free Zakaria yesterday, and Derek Thompson was on talking about this AI in education sphere. And one of the concerns with, obviously as educators we have is, how are we going to be able to assess students on these C's, like homework and take home papers, all those things have to change now. And so with assessments, for example, we may be in a world where we have to explore seriously, in-person writing assessments in those old-fashioned, I still have my composition notebooks and I carry, notepads around with me everywhere I go still, but also oral assessments and that requires reasoning, it requires adaptability, it requires problem solving. These are skills for the workforce. And so it really does, not that I want to fixate on this, because I know we tend to go sometimes as educators like, oh, students are cheating and, how are we going to do assessments? But I do think it is flipping it on a more of an optimistic lens is being able to think about how can I design instruction where students are going to be able to justify, reason, problem solve, and really tap into the social ecosystem that should be learning anyway.
Yeah, to that last point about the social ecosystem, it's such an important one. And I think another sort of subtle thing about AI that we have to be very conscious of as educators and kind of help correct is that it is, at least as it exists right now, in my experience, AI is a solitary activity.
Yeah.
It's you and today in class, I had every student on their AI. And it was very important to me that after about 20 minutes of back and forth and sort of scaffolding that for them, that we talk to each other again and that we collaborate again on these projects they're starting, give each other feedback, et cetera. Because to your point, learning is such a social experience and young people are so social. Another danger here is that we start to move towards classrooms where it's a lot of not just one-on-one with the AI, but the mindset of the individual becomes primary, not the sort of balance of individual and collective that I think the best classrooms have. So that's
Yeah.
one thought there. Another thing you made me think of is next week when we finish these mini presentations, I'm going to have students present briefly
Mm,
about what they did, and when they present, we're going to spend several days rehearsing and preparing those presentations. And
brilliant.
AI can help with that. AI can give them
Yeah.
feedback. Even on, I've had students where they'll like, I'll sort of type up some notes for them about how it went or write down what they're saying and then feed it to an AI and have the AI help them kind of refine their language. That stuff's great, I think.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're going to be in front of the room and I want them to hold the room. I want them to be
Yeah.
amazing because they are. And presence, to your point, one of these kind of these quote unquote soft skills, presence is going to be so important now.
Yeah.
And presence can be taught, but it can't be taught if kids are just talking to AI most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing how that project goes, Mike. And such great conversations. I want to for us to kind of wrap up tonight. And as we are thinking about AI fluency, of course, today we talked about, or this evening we talked about, when to use it, when to question it, when to turn it off, and really the core of our conversation has been around maintaining human agency throughout. So, like what, Mike, as we kind of close up today, what is one piece of maybe advice you want to leave to everyone listening in regards to our conversation today?
Yeah, and then I would love to hear yours.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
sure.
uh, to me, AI is AI fluency, AI literacy, the need to teach all these things, which we do need to teach, and I'm trying to teach myself.
Yeah,
They need to be connected to this broader awareness that, if anything, the AI moment in education is a reminder of how much we and our students matter in education. That in a lot of ways, like what this is about is a reminder of our
yeah,
humanity and the vitality of our humanity. And
yeah,
so that's something that I think sometimes in the AI conversation, we get so focused on how to teach AI that we forget that this is actually almost a mirror that's reminding us that it's about us and it's about our students.
yeah,
And this is their lives, and AI should be there to empower them and help them flourish, but that it's not the point now. The point remains our students and their futures.
yeah,
What about you?
yeah. That's good stuff. Yeah, I think along those same lines, I would say just have the courage to sit with uncertainty, not only in this time of AI and, not really sure about what's the next kind of evolution or stage of AI is going to be, but being okay about this kind of new exciting frontier that we are in. But not only that, but also being able to, sit with uncertainty within your own interactions with AI, being able to trust yourself, trust your own experiences, trust the data that you're seeing. I think sometimes we get so trapped into, if the AI says something confidently or with an authoritative voice, then we insert it and kind of put it into our own schema and it becomes our words. And I see this in writing all the time. I've been seeing, so there's these phrases where, like, oh, that sounds AI generated. And it could be also that the AI has just basically, they're so accustomed to seeing that output that they have incorporated it into their own language and it's not themselves anymore. So I think just the courage to be authentically you, even though we are using AI in a very exciting time and in ways I think will transform education in a very positive way, but still being very aware that human agency is still the most powerful force in education.
Well said. Yeah, this was super fun,
Thanks.
Nathan.
Yeah, it
As
is.
always, a
Yeah,
pleasure. And
yeah,
I'm sure it'll be to be continued because the field keeps changing and the
yeah,
students keep walking in the classroom door. And so there's
yeah.
going to be a lot more to talk about.
I agree. So as we go from here, and we obviously are going to be continuing to write, and I know those listening are going to want to follow your journey. Where can people find your insights and your writing, Mike?
Yeah, so I have a Substack newsletter called AI Waypoints, and then I'm on LinkedIn posting a couple times a week about thoughts about the latest podcast or development or something I'm learning with my students.
Yeah.
What about you, Nathan?
Yeah, find me on Substack as well. Make sure you give Mike a subscribe, and please subscribe to my channel as well. It's just Lang-Raad with two A's, .substack.com, or you can find me at drlangrad.com. And always excited to connect with everyone, hear their experiences. I'd like to hear, how's everyone else tackling this very complex subject. So Mike and I both, hopefully I'm okay to speak for you in this, but we both want to hear how it's going for you. We both want, we want you to drop us a line and tell us stories. We want you to, challenge our thinking. And this conversation is continually evolving. And so we are all on this kind of train together.
Yeah, and it will take a village, like it always does in education, and we're all in this village as we speak on this call. So we definitely want to connect with you
Yeah.
all and learn more about your thoughts and keep the conversation going here and elsewhere.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Let's call it a night. Thanks everyone for joining, and I hope to
Thanks for
see you
joining
soon.
us. Thanks,
Thanks
Nathan.
everybody. Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
Later.